All right. Today we're looking at a pattern called Counterbalanced, and this is a very dense pattern. We have these open hexagon twists, these P1 hybrid hexagon twists. It would be a completely flagstone pattern except that there's these triangle gaps that are not part of the twists on this side of the paper. We also have a lot of closed triangle twists on the opposite side of the paper. And I'll be walking you through how to fold this pattern on a 32-fold triangle grid on a hexagon. This full form is on 48 grid divisions, standard grid aligned with the edge of the paper. So let's go ahead and get started. And I do want to point out that this is kind of part of the flagstone series of tutorials, but there's a couple ideas baked into this pattern, like those hybrid hexagon twists and the extended symmetries, that are not covered in the flagstone playlist. So I'm dropping a link in the chat of another tutorial that does cover how to set up these P1 hybrid hexagon twists and use the same pattern of extended symmetry. So we're going to go ahead and start with our open hexagon twist in the center. That means on the right hand corner of the paper, I'm putting a mountain fold one space above the corner and a valley fold one space above that. And that's extending towards the center of the paper, but not passing all the way through because I need to make the same fold on each of the other corners of the paper. And so you'll notice that I'm keeping the center of the paper kind of raised up. My hand is actually lifted off the table as I'm setting this up. And I'm doing my best to keep these pleats that are already in place flat with my left hand as I'm adding new pleats. I want to make sure everything is nice and smooth and the center bit is rotated around. And then we can press to squash the open hexagon twist. Hi Early, glad you could join us. Yeah, these flagstone patterns are really interesting for a lot of people, and actually these are the most requested kinds of tutorials. Like when people are asking for tutorials, it's usually some kind of flagstone pattern. So you asked and I'm delivering. Once we have that open hexagon twist, we're going to flip to the back side and fold our closed triangle twists. Now, I'm going to fold all 6 of these triangle twists while we're on this side. This is not the only order that the twist could go in, but it is the order that has the shortest sequence of instructions before a repeat. So I'm going to fold these as densely as possible. That means that my valley fold is going to be right up next to the folded mountain of the next pleat over. These are going to be closed triangle twists. So our mountain is going to be 1 grid spacing away. And our third mountain, so we had our first coming from the hexagon, our second with this new pleat that we're setting up, our third mountain fold is going to come to that same point that the first 2 met at, and we're going to have this single space between these parallel mountain folds of separate pleats, and press to squash. Now we're going to rotate, and we're going to have the same thing on the next pleat. We just need to recognize that that next pleat is tucked under the twist that we just made. So we don't want to skip around here. We want to go strictly in sequence. So we'll have our valley fold next to the folded mountain, our mountain fold 1 space further. And instead of running the third pleat straight through our previous triangle twist, because that's where it's headed, straight through the center, what we're going to do is put in a compound wrap so that we're taking this pleat that used to go straight out from the corner of this triangle, we're splitting it into a three-way intersection of mountain folds, and then one space down below, we're splitting that again into a three-way intersection of mountain folds. And so this is splitting into a three-way intersection. We have a valley fold down here paired with this mountain fold. This here is splitting into a three-way intersection of mountain folds, and we have a valley fold down here paired with this mountain fold. That's a compound wrap. And yeah, welcome to everyone watching live. I'm glad you're all so excited. So I'm going to repeat that step as I work my way around, rotating, lifting my next pleat that I want to put a triangle on out from under the previous triangle, folding up on top of the next pleat over, running my third direction of pleat so the mountain fold hits the same intersection point, and then instead of running the pleat through the triangle, I'm going to put in that compound wrap. So this time we really are doing compound wraps for all of them. For patterns that are less densely spaced, I would do pleat overlaps for 5 out of the 6 pleat interactions, and then a compound wrap for the 6th one. But here we're doing compound wraps on every single one. One of the things that I've learned since I did the flagstone hexagons video is a special trick for getting the hexagon twists to go in without needing to run a pleat through the previously existing twists. And I'm pretty sure we'll run into that at some point today. And yeah, that'll be a very useful trick for all kinds of flagstones. Yeah, early flagstones often become very complicated while folding, but keeping in mind the underlying tiling, so not the flagstone tiling of, let's say, hexagons or triangles or rhombi, but the underlying tiling of hexagons and triangles, or in some cases aligned rhombi or chevron rhombi or hexagon, rhombus, triangle, rhombus. Keeping in mind that underlying tiling and going for pseudo-tiling breaks where you're not necessarily completing whole twists could be an easier way to get through the flagstones. With this one, we're lucky because we do have true tiling breaks the whole way because it's on an underlying hexagons and triangles 6-fold tiling. For this 6th triangle twist, so we've got the first 5, it's time for the 6th. We are going to need a compound wrap both on the twist that we're putting in and the previous triangle. So I'm marking my valley and mountain folds, and I'll go ahead and mark this mountain fold in the center of our triangle twist as well. And I'll start by bringing that flap up above the previous triangle, and then opening the bottom pleat to pass that valley fold through. And that valley is going to immediately bounce down and hit the pre-existing valley fold down below and split out into a 3-way intersection of valley folds, which once it's followed by the mountain folds one spacing away is exactly the same compound wrap that we've been doing before. Now I'm going to lift up the center of the twist, and we have to be really careful here to keep this point in mind as the center of the twist and not that one. And then I can put in the compound wrap that we've been doing off the corner of the previous triangle twist. So like I mentioned, we do have to keep in mind which of these we're going to squash. And with some flagstone tessellations, it could be either of them. You often get that kind of situation in flagstone patterns. But in this one, we really want to keep the 6-fold symmetry around this hexagon. From here, we're going to flip back to the hexagon side, and we've got all of these compound wraps with the flaps sticking over everything. And I'm going to start by taking the pleats going into this compound wrap and setting up an open hexagon twist. I'm going to just fold through any of the other layers that may be getting in my way. And yes, already we're going to run into that special trick. So if I have a regular hexagon here, and here I've got this pleat that's kind of stuck up over things, the modification that I need to make to turn this into the P1 hybrid hexagon that I'm using today is to change this pleat to go into the center of the twist instead. So I'm shifting this pleat one space over. Now I still have that problem where I have this pleat laying on top of my corner of the twist. So what I'm going to do is actually pop this open and functionally do a wrap here. So the key thing is the original pleat coming into this corner was coming in this direction. So in this grid line. But what we're going to do, and I'll draw this in solid blue lines, is take it out and make a three-way intersection with this corner, or with the next pleat over. And then we're going to have a valley fold coming out from that three-way intersection of mountain folds. And this is going to create an accordion pleat under this long edge of the P1 hybrid hexagon twist. This pleat is still laying on top of the next pleat over. We can get everything settled in place and then press to squash. So we manipulated the grid, basically pulled this corner out from under and figured out a better way to deal with that particular spike or that particular contraction in the paper, the pleat, that made it more visible to squash. From here, we have a choice of which way we want to go around, but I'm thinking going around clockwise is going to be a little easier because we won't need this trick if we're going around clockwise because we'll be doing a triangle wrap instead. So if I rotate my paper and go to this next compound wrap, I marked the valley fold that I'll need to put in in order to form a triangle wrap, which is this three-way intersection of valley folds. And I'm going to open the compound wrap in order to do this. Once we have our mountain folds that match with those valley folds, that triangle wrap will close up. For now, we need a few more pleats to get there. So we're going to put in this long pleat that's passing through a lot of layers here and flipping some pleats over down below. And one thing to pay attention to is that that corner is the corner of the long edge. So we're going to have long edge, short edge, long edge, short edge as we work our way around the center. And so on this end, we do have our mountain fold coming to this corner of the long edge. And then we have our one pleat that is off by a grid spacing that is having the mountain fold go straight into the center of what would have been a fully open hexagon twist. And that's creating an accordion pleat on top of the pleat from the triangle wrap. And with all of that in place, we can press to squash. Notice with these P1 hybrid hexagons, I'm using my bone folder or my finger to indent this area underneath and make sure that that's folding cleanly. So now we kind of have an option of, do we flip over and squash the triangle from that triangle wrap, or do we keep going around? In the tutorial here, I'm going to err on the side of repeating steps really close together and then having a different step where we go and squash those triangles. If I was folding on my own, and one of the things we'll see in the next ring around the center is I'm always going to go back for that triangle, even though I need to flip the paper over, squash the triangle, then flip the paper immediately back. But for this first ring around the center, we can go with some more condensed steps, and then we get to see the repeat a little bit faster. So for this next overlap, I'm going to repeat exactly what I did for the previous hexagon. I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to have a corner of the twist here. That means I have a valley fold coming to that corner. That is the valley fold I'm going to use to set up my triangle wrap. I'm going to open the rest of the compound wrap and set up this long pleat that goes through seemingly all of creation. And I'm going to make sure to set up my remaining pleats. And one of the things that I'm already picking up from the previous repeat is that the pleat from the triangle wrap and the pleat for the closed type pleat in the hybrid hexagon are making an accordion. And then the pleat from the previous hexagon is one space further away. And then we can squash the new twist. And repeating again, I'll set up the triangle wrap, open up the compound wrap, send my new long pleat out and away. I'm noticing, even as I'm doing this, that in the next repeat, there will be no space to send that long pleat without running through another twist. So we'll see if it's easier to just run through the twist or to find some other solution in the next repeat of this step. And so now with this next repeat, so I'm sending this pleat over. Yeah, it really looks like there's not much choice unless I do kind of a, no, even the awkward wrap is not going to save me here. So I'm going to fold through the existing twists, which, by the way, this whole time has been including folding through the triangle twist on the back. And one of the great things about flagstone patterns, particularly with open hexagon, closed triangle, closed rhombus, those kinds of twists, is that the grid lines inside the twist line up with the grid lines outside. So I don't have to worry about creating new folds when I'm folding through an existing twist. I do, however, have to worry about, gosh, that's a lot of layers. Maybe don't press it too hard, or try to be a little bit better about precision when I'm folding that, so it's not like smearing the grid lines. But the Skytone paper is really robust, and backlighting solves a lot of like wiggle room problems. So now I'm on to the 6th hybrid hexagon twist. We've got the first one folded partway through over there, and then 2, 3, 4, 5 onto the 6th. And with the 6th one, we're going to resolve that little trick that we did with the first twist in the beginning. So I'm starting with the same compound wrap, the same open up the, or starting with the triangle wrap rather, open up the compound wrap. And now we have this area that is not really behaving like anywhere else that we've seen. So I'm going to get rid of the blue intersection of mountain folds, restore the red line that should be going into that twist if there wasn't mitigating factors. And now when I put in this pleat that would be in all of the other repeats passing through everything basically, I can, instead of putting the pleat through, do a triangle wrap with this pleat on top, and then finish setting up this P1 hybrid hexagon twist. One of the things that I noticed my paper doing that might be confusing for some of you if you haven't folded many of these hybrid hexagon twists before, is I noticed that this bit had dented in. And just because that bit is dented in does not mean that your pleats are in the wrong place. It just means that it needs to be pulled back into shape. And then you can go ahead and press to squash the hybrid hexagon twist. Yes, earlier there are definitely lots of layers, lots of pleat overlaps at certain stages of folding, especially when the twists are this close together. So I always like to say we want to minimize pleat overlaps, but that is not the same as eliminating or not having many pleat overlaps. So as we fold more and more rings around the center, we're going to see more and more pleat overlaps as we go. So for this pattern, now that we've got the hybrid hexagons, we want to flip over and squash our triangle twists from all of those triangle wraps. And we can see here on the back of the paper that all of the triangle twists are in the same positions that they would be if we were doing a flagstone hexagons, just pure open hexagons pattern. But since we've got the hybrid twists, that one pleat is different from the flagstone hexagons pattern. And that's going to make all the difference for our final result. So one of the main features that we see in the counterbalanced pattern, the feature that it's named for, is that these long edges of the hybrid hexagons are exactly meeting the copies on the next repeat. And so that's something that we want to try and set up. It's also the case that we have this triangle twist in a position of threefold rotational symmetry, where we see three things the same on each side. So that's another feature that we want to be looking for when we're folding this pattern. And that triangle, in this case, is a closed triangle twist. I'll be talking a lot about another pattern on my Instagram and Facebook feeds this week that uses an open triangle twist in that position with the same motif, and you can see those long edges then shift away from each other. So let's start with, so I would often go for the triangles next to help us find the next hybrid hexagon. But I think in this case, it's a little arbitrary whether you set up some triangles first or the next hexagon. I'm going to go ahead and go for the next hexagon since we're on this side. From looking at this guy, and I do have the crease pattern up, but it's actually easier to look at the folded form sometimes. I'm seeing that this closed triangle twist has its center one space out from the corner where the long edge meets the short edge on the outside of this motif. So that would be a center right here. So if that's where the mountain fold is sitting after it's been folded, then the valley needs to be one space away. And I can open up that pleat, put in that valley fold, and do a triangle wrap. And now we have the future center of that triangle twist precisely where we need it to be. Now we need to figure out, okay, which kind of pleat is this one? Which kind of pleat is this one? And the one coming out here is the closed type pleat. This one is the open type pleat that is covering the long edge. And you can see that, so I opened things up so that this mountain fold from the triangle wrap is continuing through 3 grid spacings, actually 4 from the point of the triangle wrap. And then I'm going to have a new mountain fold. So where this mountain meets the corner of the next P1 hybrid hexagon twist over, I'm going to have a new mountain fold going up this way, and I'm going to do a triangle wrap under there. And there are some options for how to layer this triangle wrap. I'll just show this layer could be above or below. I'm going to stick it below so the wrap is wrapping around all layers. Returning to the hexagon side, I can then add more pleats to fill out the rest of my, if we ignore this one, open hexagon, and then the closed pleat is just tucking a corner under. And you can see immediately here that these long edges of the hybrid hexagon twists are going to exactly match up. And we can go ahead and squash that twist. And I do want to emphasize that this is not the only way to set up this particular set of hybrid hexagon and two triangles, but working from more of the folded pattern, like you would if you were reverse engineering from a photo, say, felt a little bit better for this particular step. So next I'm going to flip over and squash both of those closed triangle twists that I had set up in the previous step. And from here, I now have all the positions of symmetry in the broader pattern. So I have a position of threefold rotational symmetry in the center of this closed triangle that is that one exception to the flagstone nature of the broader pattern. And then I have a position of twofold symmetry where these long edges of the hybrid hexagons are meeting up. So when I talk about a position of threefold symmetry, it's going to be in this triangle. A position of twofold symmetry is going to be between those two hexagons. Next up, we can use the fact that this triangle is a position of threefold rotational symmetry and say, well, coming out from the corners, so not directly not directly on the pleat from this triangle twist, but other pleats at the same location at those corners, we're going to have more triangle twists. And so we're going to have the valley fold for this one here, the valley fold for this one here. And I'm going to go ahead and set up those two triangle twists. So this one's set up as a three-way intersection that is then laid down flat. And this one, I'm popping this valley down, setting up the three-way intersection. That pleat going down in is the one that needs to be correct. So this one, instead of flipping over into the squashing standing form, I can lay down flat. And now we have, once we flip back, three pleats, 1, 2, 3 pleats going into our new hybrid hexagon twist. So then the question is, what type of pleat, closed or open type, are each of these pleats? And I can look and say, okay, this hybrid hexagon is precisely the same as this one. So the thing up and slightly left of it has to be precisely the same. So from there I can say, okay, this corner is an open type pleat. This corner is an open type pleat, but this one over here, that's the closed type pleat. So I can say, okay, if this one's open and this one's open, and there's something odd going on here. Wait. Then I need to go back because I took out my triangle wrap, and I need to trust the triangles. Okay. There it is. And flipping back. So if this is an open type pleat, it's going one in, one out. This one's going one in, one out. Okay. One's going one in, one out. This one's going one in, one out. And we need something else going on here in order to get this hexagon to behave nicely. Oh, well, that explains it. It's not that hexagon, it's the one off of this pleat. That would be why the story is not adding up. Okay, so back to my triangle wraps. The actual one that makes sense as a closed pleat is this one. And then we're going to have the rest of our pleats like this, and yes, that long edge will then match this long edge down here. So let me walk you through that. I've got, so here's a faster way to come to the same conclusion. I've got this pleat coming out of the position of threefold rotational symmetry. On each of the other pleats coming out of that position, that is the last open type pleat before the closed type pleat as you walk around counterclockwise. So as I walk around counterclockwise, that is now the closed type pleat, and I need the rest of the pleats to be open type. What's going on over here is that I had a pleat here that was open type, or rather the triangle wrap, and this pleat is open type. So I still need a pleat in that direction, and it's going to add on and create a double depth pleat. It's going to have these pleat overlaps here, and we're going to add another pleat on top of that stack. So yes, lots of layers. And then we're going to press to squash. And I'm being particularly careful around the wraps and around these places where there's lots of layers going on. And then I'll flip the paper back over and take this triangle wrap and turn it into a closed triangle twist. And this one, when I go to flip it over, it has a lot of pleats bound up in it. And so I'm going to open up just enough. So this was a valley fold tucked under here. I'm opening up this first pleat just enough to get this mountain fold running out. The valley fold then is going to pop down, and we have that compound wrap from before, and we can settle everything else back into place. And yeah, earlier, it's definitely essential to be able to figure out both from the symmetry points and from the previous repeats of the pattern where you are and where you're going, because particularly as you get further and further out, there's not going to be tutorials for hardly anything. So that's really the skills that I'm trying to teach in these tutorials, is like how to become independent while folding these patterns. So next, I would like to set up some more triangle twists to help me figure out the next hybrid hexagon. And I'm going to be aiming for 2 new triangles for each new hexagon. And I'm noticing as I open these pleats that this pleat from the hexagon was kind of interrupted by the pleats going this way. And I'm also noticing that off of the corner of this group of 4 triangles, I have that kind of half spacing, single wide tube to get to the corner of the next triangle. And so as I go out here, I'm going to do that very dense spacing, setting up the next triangle twist. And over on this side, so we've got this kind of thicker area, which matches this thicker area, which means that whatever happened here is the same thing that's going to happen here. And so on this pleat, I'm going to have that 3-way intersection of mountain folds where the corner of the twist is going to be lining up with the corners of the existing triangle twist. And so with these 2 new triangle twists, these new pleats going into the hybrid hexagon, I can then flip over and say, oh, I'm right next to a long edge. Let me pop up this edge so it's a functional long edge next to it. Therefore, the rest of these pleats need to be open type on this P1 hybrid hexagon. And press to squash. And did that press nicely? Mostly. And squash. And then we'll flip over and squash the 2 closed triangle twists. Next up, we'll repeat these same 2 sets of steps. So I'm going to find those 2 closed triangle twists, and this one I'm going to pop the layer up and then set up the 3-way intersection laid flat on top. On this one, I'm setting up my 3-way intersection so it's laying, actually both of these are laying on top of the triangle that we just squashed. And then flipping over, I'm going to make that little dent be on a grid line, and we can remember from last time that we had our long edge out facing away from things. That's going to be this long edge, and we can choose what order to add our remaining open pleats, but this one is going to be our closed type pleat. And given the other two open type pleats, we can definitely find the center of the twist and work out the details there. Again, I want to call attention to, we had that triangle wrap in here, and then we added another pleat on top of that. So now we have a double depth pleat. And then we have a lot of layers passing through here that we're adding another pleat on top of. And then we flip over and squash the two triangle twists, keeping in mind that this one that passes through other pleats is going to work better for us later if we put in a compound wrap. And the tricky thing with this one is that we have this mountain fold in here for the pleat next to the hybrid hexagon. And it looks weird because you would expect the pleat from the hexagon to go through first before this other pleat, but it doesn't, and that's something we'll have to deal with later. Another little piece of experience I'm going to say that I can give you is that this layering is going to be harder to deal with later. So I'm going to go ahead and put that triangle back on top. So it had been on top before we set up the three-way intersection. We tucked it under. Now we're putting it back on top so that when we get back around to it and we want to do a compound wrap in here, those layers are accessible. So next, we're going to have our two new triangle twists. And as I'm opening this up, that pleat from the previous hexagon that I said was weird, we're going to fix it. We're going to put in the pleat, the valley fold going all the way out from the corner of the hexagon. We can put in these three-way intersections for the next triangles in either order. Doing this one first takes out a pleat from this whole situation. And then we've got that dense spacing between these two triangles. Here we have a double depth pleat. Because this is folded over, once it's squashed, it'll be back to two single depth pleats. And flipping over, we're going to need to pop out that line that's the long edge of this hybrid hexagon twist. And then we can set up the rest of the open type pleats and press to squash. Now we've seen this sequence of working through a set of parallel pleats twice already. So I'm going to speed up so we can get to the next ring around the center. I'm going to put in the two new triangle intersections. Popping this layer up and flipping over. This one is going to be my closed type pleat. So I'm setting up everything else as an open type pleat. Flipping back, I can squash my two triangle twists, reordering the layers on each of those squashes as needed. Again, the tricky bit with this one is that there is, in fact, a mountain fold that goes straight under on here. And then I'll open up these overlaps and put in two new triangle intersections. Flip over and find the rest of that hybrid hexagon. You'll notice that my sequences for this ring around the center involve two hybrid hexagons, each of which come with two triangle twists. Always in the second ring around the center, you will have two hexagons. First ring you have one hexagon, second ring you have two, third ring you'll have three, etc. That is something you can pick up from the tiling. And then I'm using my position of symmetry to say, okay, these are the next places where I need triangles because I already have a triangle in a matching position. And then I can set up the next hybrid hexagon. And come back and squash those triangles. And always in these patterns where you have all the triangle twists on one side and the hexagon twists on the other, or pretty much any pattern where you have the next twist with the pleat overlap on the other side, you want to do a compound wrap before squashing the triangle. And then open up. And this time I kind of recognized that that line would be the line for the long edge of the hybrid hexagon. So I went ahead and poked it from the other side. And flip. And squash. And squash. And now we're on to the last set of parallel pleats for this ring around the center. And there are more of them. So our first two hybrid hexagon twists, we're going to do in exactly the same way as before. I'm going to have the corner of this next twist come to the corner of this triangle, so my valley fold will be there. But that valley fold will not be fully realized until after I squash the twist, so it needs to sit as a three-way intersection. and flipping over. That's the one that becomes the double depth pleat. Then we have these two more open pleats. And yeah, to Early's point earlier, there's a lot of overlaps in there. It's getting kind of messy. But it's a organized chaos because we know that we'll be able to get through this and there will not be pleat overlaps once we're done. So this pair of triangles, I'm still squashing in the same way. The compound wrap is only for the first pleat that I run into. And then my next two triangles are going to be the same ones that I've been finding. I just see another clue for where this one has to go over here, and it has a pleat overlap now. And this one setting up there, I can choose to pop that line for that long edge if I want, and then flip over, and I have most of my pleats already. Technically wouldn't have had that one, but there's some funky business that goes on, like opening up the pleat overlaps to create open hexagon twists. Like sometimes you get pleats for free that are just kind of remnants of the pleat that was going through before. And then flipping over, can squash this triangle, no problem. This one is going to need a compound wrap. Opening up just the first pleat that I encounter, got that three-way intersection of mountains, and I'm making three-way intersections of valleys down below. And once I've closed all of those pleats, I can press to squash. So now we're in a new situation that we haven't seen in precisely this way yet, where we need another triangle on this side, and that's pretty familiar. But we already have the triangle on this side of this position of threefold rotational symmetry. So we're going to do the triangle that goes on the far side of that single spacing that we would usually do for the later twist. But that later twist is already there because that's the one that we did first. So now flipping over, we can recognize our long edge is going that way. And we're going to end up with a double depth pleat on this edge, which is where we would always end up with a double depth pleat, but usually there wouldn't be the other twist already there. And press to squash. I'm going to reorder that layer for all of them where that is different. And then flip, and I can freely squash both of my triangle twists. So one of the great things about doing this pattern instead of the hexagon's flagstone is that we do get some pleats that are not just adding to this stack, which they would with the only hexagons. So the next thing to figure out as we enter the next ring around the center, and we will probably be hitting the edge of the paper with some of these twists, the next thing to figure out is what order do we work through these pleats. And I want to point out that for this set of parallel pleats, these guys are a lot shorter, or are hitting the paper sooner relative to these grid lines than this guy over here. And so we can take a look at, okay, here's an identical place to up here, what's happening down below. And we're going to get into a copy of the central hexagon here. So for my new triangle twists, I'm going to have those valley folds coming out this half space out from the previous twist. And these are going to set up and lay down. This one, I'm being careful to open only this pleat, not the one below, and lay down, and flipping over. Well, we were going to get a whole open hexagon twist, but we ended up with a partial twist that looks like a hybrid hexagon. So yeah, earlier, seeing several strokes in advance, prepare several folds to minimize the number of layers. Yeah, that's basically what we're doing with setting up the two triangles before setting up the hexagon. Thanks for the explanation. That's a chess quote. Okay, so one of the things going on here that the paper kind of did on its own is set up that same little jog. So the pleat that goes to that corner actually is going in this direction, not that direction. But because this layer would have covered the corner, we can let that pleat float out, and this is going to be a double depth pleat. We can let the mountain fold float out, form a three-way intersection, and have a double depth pleat rather. And then once we flip back, we can squash our triangle twists. And this one, instead of squashing immediately with the extra layers included on it, we're going to turn into a compound wrap. And that is still going to have these layers kind of bunchy over the triangle corner, or the hexagon corner rather. And then we can either go about this by flipping over and trying to place the next hexagon, or by adding more triangles. Here, I'm noticing that over these fat spaces, the only place where we have mountain folds 2 spaces apart, we have these triangles jutting out over the these edges that are not on grid lines. And so that tells me that the triangle corner needs to be over here we're going to have the valley fold right along the existing mountain fold. So that's going to come in this way. And I went ahead and pushed that line down because I recognize that this is going to be a flat edge of the hybrid hexagon twist. Then over here, this is the step where we really rectify what's going on with the corner of the open hexagon and set up the next triangle. Here we're only going to get half a triangle. And then flipping over, we can form the remainder of this twist. And press to squash. So like I said at the very beginning, today we're working on a 32-fold triangle grid on a hexagon. In order to get all of the next repeat, we would need 48 grid divisions, which is what this was folded with on a standard grid. And then flipping back over, we're going to have our two closed twists, closed triangle twists. So I'll work through the next edge yet because there is a little bit of difference. Here we have a triangle that is feeding into the next position of threefold rotational symmetry, which is going to be on this side of it. And so we'll see slightly different things. We have this triangle, which is going to be only half of a triangle set up laying on top of this guy. Now this is not the position of threefold rotational symmetry. So the next corner of a triangle is not going to be at the corner of this one, but instead one space out. And just like on the opposite side of the position of twofold rotational symmetry there, and pop, and pop. Oh, actually, I do not want to open this pleat yet. There we go. And flipping over, I need to see, okay, what's going on with this. These two twists are exactly the same as these two. And this guy is set up just over here. So we're going to have the closed type pleat over on this edge. So instead of letting that float out open, I'm going to just dimple it in and make it a closed type corner, make this a 90-degree corner. And that's going to kind of preserve the pattern. A little pedantic, I know, but that's where we're at. And flipping back over, I can squash this triangle twist, the partial triangle twist. There would probably be like layering things going on with these guys if I had more grid. And then I can do the compound wrap with this triangle. And squash. And once again, there's that little weirdness with the pleat coming right up under that closed triangle twist. And then we're back into what we did before, with this being our duplicate of the center. And so I'll open just the one pleat to get that in. I do not want to open this pleat under here. And I would have another triangle out off the edge. And this would be the point where I pop that corner to set up the three-way intersection of mountains and the double depth pleat down below. And if you're folding with more grid divisions, you'll know it's time to do that because there's a pleat literally laying on top of the corner of your twist. Just like we saw towards the center. And flipping over, time to squash this triangle twist. And get that guy in place. And again, there's a mountain fold heading straight under it, but that's okay. It's needed to lay down flat. And we can move on into the next triangle, the next hybrid hexagon. With our very partial triangle twist up there. And we actually get this whole hybrid hexagon. As we set up this guy. Yeah, this is definitely not an easy pattern. But it's one of those things that once you learn the techniques for this pattern, particularly that trick with popping out the corner that's locked under a pleat and then going and doing doing a bit of pleat management to make it to come to your will, do your bidding, then you can use that trick a lot of other places that would have been hard, if not impossible, to fold before. So that's what's going on with our counterbalanced pattern. And it is one of the harder ones that I would say that you can get good instructions out of. Like there's harder patterns to fold, but it's mostly like there is no way to make this flat. Now air fold this twist and you'll be able to get it in anyways. So, and to be honest, we'll be seeing some of that in Advent of Test this coming year. It's not my preferred mode of execution, but it does get you some really awesome patterns. So yes, that is a hint that this year Advent of Test is going to be very, it's going to have some very challenging, very beautiful patterns, and they're going to use some flagstone motifs. So look forward to that one. So I'm working my way around to get to that very last twist. And yeah, precisely. There's easier models in the previous years of Advent of Test, not just 2024, but also 2022 and 2023. So I'm not concerned about people not being able to find something to fold. But yeah, we're going to have a good challenge when it comes to Advent of Tess this year. And again, like I said with this tutorial, like someone asked for more flagstone tutorials, and here I am. Someone asked for harder patterns in Advent of Tess. I don't remember who, but we're going to go with it this year. So another thing I want to emphasize is that the speed that I'm folding right now is indicative of a certain level of mastery and is not a speed that I think is reasonable for anyone who's just starting out, or even anyone who has only a few years of tessellation folding experience. This is a speed that comes from folding at least 1,000 tessellations at this point. And so the bottom line is, don't be frustrated if you can't fold as fast as me. I've been doing this for a while. And so coming around the bend. Oh, another thing I want to mention is that, like, yeah, flagstone patterns are really neat, but it's not the only way to get new tessellation designs. You don't have to go for the super hard patterns to be folding new tessellations. There's all kinds of ways to get new tessellation designs, and this is just one of them. They are, however, very neat and shiny. So I've got one more set of parallel pleats to go before that last one. See, I'm getting close to the end. Yeah, that's one thing tessellations are really good for, building patience. That might actually be the only thing that's required to fold tessellations is patience. And speaking of patience, I'm going to reward everyone's patience at the end of the video with a backlit view of this pattern. And so coming on around the bend, got almost into that last set of parallel pleats. And actually, one answer to like, how do I have the patience to fold bigger patterns, bigger pieces, is I don't fold them at tutorial speed. And you can check out some of my videos where I am just like folding a pattern on camera without teaching it to get a sense of what that speed is like. So this first hybrid hexagon on the corner is exactly the same as all of the others that we've been seeing. We're going to see that one again as we reach that final corner. But really, since we're at the edge of the paper, we're not going to notice a difference in what we're folding until we get closer to that corner. And next up, it's the copy of the center, the open hexagon twist. That, since I'm at the edge of the paper, my grid conveniently moved that pleat out of the way for me. But yeah, whenever we have this kind of corner set up, we're going to need to do that fancy move to unwrap the pleat from the corner of the hexagon twist. Okay. Apparently I opened the pleats too much, and now it's really hard to see where things go. We'll just go with that one. I think it's that one. There's a lot of different ways to get that little bit to lay down flat, but you do definitely want to have it flat before squashing your triangle twist. And then you can worry about it being in the correct orientation when you go and put in the next triangle. So here, I don't really have a next pleat to compare to. The corner of my next triangle is going to be there. You're very welcome, Erlu. I'm glad you're enjoying learning to fold tessellations with me. So here we have our whole hybrid hexagon. And then we have one more partial hybrid hexagon in the corner. But first we've got this triangle twist and associated miscellaneous overlaps on grid lines to deal with. And this close to the edge of the paper, we only can see one more triangle. The next one would be matching this set of triangles around the open hexagon. And we've got that hybrid hexagon, and if we want to be super pedantic about it, then this is our grid triangle that gets a valley fold through the center because that's our right angle corner, because we went long, short, or going all the way around, long, short, long, short, long, short. Got to be that right angle corner. And our last partial triangle twist. So as promised, I'm going to get out a light and do some backlighting. Here's the whole thing, the whole shebang of Counterbalanced, where we've got this kind of, it really reminds me of a soccer ball, but it's like not quite soccer ball-y, lined up with the next one. I also see these as like capsules for pills. There's a lot of different things that you could see in this tessellation. And with the backlighting, we see those seams light up. And we get kind of the crinkly effect of all of these lines going in and out of our open hexagon edges. And from the back, we just see all these triangles. It's like we meant to fold just these triangles, and there just happens to be these spaces between, and there happens to be these places where we get that bright line of light. And yeah, there's the whole pattern with backlighting. All right. Happy folding, everyone. I will see you next week, where I will be doing one of those patterns that I mentioned, a live folded design. It's going to have some elements that look flagstone, but I wouldn't classify them as flagstone because it doesn't actually have the grout line. It's actually connected at the corners. But that will actually be on a 45-degree grid. So there's lots of different techniques that can come into play with that. And I will say this is a pattern that'll fold next week that's inspired by my Tessellation Academy students, because we figured out this particular connection of like, oh, if you put this twist and that twist next to each other, then the edges line up. And it's like a diagonal open square twist and an open right triangle twist. But yes, that would be a much easier one to fold than this one right here. All right, happy folding, y'all. Keep trying. And like, if you want to practice this pattern without the whole 32 grid divisions, I'm pretty certain that the central motif would fit on 16 grid divisions. And I'm just checking my my master pattern, and it would indeed fit on 16 divisions. You wouldn't get the triangle in the position of threefold rotational symmetry, but that motif would fit on 16. All right, happy folding. See y'all later.